Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, I'm real estate agent Nick Belmore. And today we're going to be diving into a hot topic. It's the housing shortage. And we're going to be reacting to a video by the one and only Patrick Bet-David. If you're not familiar with him, he's an entrepreneur, he's a podcaster, he's definitely an entertainer, but he loves to tackle big topics like this one here. So let's go ahead, let's dive in, and let's see what this is all about. Let's see what his take is on the housing shortage.
If you're under 35, you don't own a house, you're not married, you don't have kids, this episode's for you. You're gonna wanna share this with everybody else. There's a reason why you don't. In 2018, we had a housing shortage of roughly 2.5 million.
2018, a housing shortage of 2.5 million. Okay, so if we think about that, they say that we're roughly at around 180 million households, not population, but households at that stage. So 4% short on the housing we need is what I'm hearing there. I think that's pretty accurate.
Argument to you why most people in America under the age of 35 don't own a house. The data's gonna tell you. Do you know this is the biggest housing shortage we've...
Just curious, and the data does show that. A lot of people under 35 don't own a home. For me, back in 2001, when I was 21, that's when I bought my first home. I definitely found value there. I'm curious from you guys, what are your thoughts in the comments when it comes to, what's the right age to buy a home for especially a lot of the millennials and Gen Z watchers out there? What's your target age to buy a home? I mean, for me, it was early as possible. That was definitely part of the culture in the late 90s and early 2000s. Just curious how younger people view it today.
Ever had in the history of America. In 2018, it was 2.5 million. Today, 6 years later, we're looking at 6 to 7 million. Now, how do we get here?
6 to 7 million in shortage nationwide for housing. Is that true? I mean, looking at continuously rising prices, it definitely tells us that supply and demand aren't lined up. So is it 6 million? I don't know. It's hard to tell how they came to that data, but I wouldn't be surprised, quite honestly, when you look at the factors of the market, when you look at some of the manipulation that's been going on in pricing between supply and between interest rates. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Some basic data for you to be thinking about. In 1970, we were building 418,000 units every year for entry-level homes. That has dropped to today roughly 55,000. By the way, 410,000 new properties we're building today. 55,000. So I sat there and said, why would it decrease? Has population decreased? Of course not. We had 200 million in 1970. We got 340 today. Then I sat there and I said, well, how long did it take to save for a house back in the days? 2.4 years of saving money to buy a house,
Again, good point. I will say this, I started in the construction business in basically 1996, and until I became a real estate agent in 2001, I ran a rough framing crew, and we were, the boots on the ground. If I look at just the climate today, just at how many framers are out there and what it looks like and how many subs are going up, I'm going to tell you, I can absolutely see where that would be a factor.
How much it takes today? 7 years. You know what the average house was in 1970? Roughly $23,000. You know what it is today? $420,000. That's 18.3 times how much more it's worth to buy a house today than it was in 1970. So that's it.
18.3 times in the past. What are we looking at there? I mean, really, ultimately 50 to 55 years. I would say that's definitely an interesting stat to look at, especially based on the numbers of the shortage at the moment.
Your income must have increased that many times, right? The average median household income in 1970 was $9,800. Today it's $80,000, increased only by 8 times. The average age in 1970 was 28. Today's average age is 38 years old. This is a real epidemic that we have to figure out a way to address, because these kids are coming out of college. They want to buy a house. They want to live with their family. They want to have a wife. They want to have a husband. They want to have kids. But the market is working against them.
I 150,000% agree with Patrick Bet-David in that fact, right? I think that without a doubt, not only is homeownership key to gaining financial freedom in life, giving stability, controlling your cost of housing throughout life, I think those are really important things. And obviously, he's talking about a key factor that younger people do. And a lot of my experience is showing the exact same thing. And quite honestly, as a society, we are doing a disservice to our younger people by not providing them access to secure housing and giving them that step up, that first house that they can live in and build up some equity and be able to go ahead and follow the traditional cycle of the starter house to the mid-level to the executive level house. I definitely think that it is in the best interest of not just people's quality of life, but in the best interest of the economy to continue and to really incentivize helping younger people get into homes. Now, as a landlord, listen, young people, I love when you guys pay me the rent. That being said, it's not the best thing for you. No question, home ownership, while it right now absolutely has some factors going against young people, it is the best way to create that financial stability.
About that today. Okay, so if you get value out of this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Check this out. Look at this chart with me here. This shows the percent.
All right, hey, Patrick David's right. If you get value out of this video, give me the thumbs up. Please like this channel. Also, if you like these reaction videos, check out this video right here where we reacted to CNBC's take on why builders can't keep up with the market demand.
Percent of new homes being built under 1,400 square feet. Go to 1976, roughly 37%. It peaked at 40%. That means 4 out of every 10 homes we built was under 1,400 square feet. You know what that is today? 10%. Out of every 10 homes we built, only one is under 1,400 square feet. So isn't the dream like you come out, you get out of school, you get a job, mom, 3 years, you save money, maybe mom and dad give you $20,000, $50,000 for down payment of the house. You buy a nice 1,200 square foot condo, nice little place, whatever it may be. Then you work out of it, you live, you raise maybe $80,000 in equity in it. You take that money plus a down payment, then you get another house, then you take that, then you get another house, and then it grows, right? You're not doing that today because we're no longer building 1,400 square foot houses. So now when people say, why do we have so many kids living with their parents today? Do you know what the statistic is of adults under the age of 30 living with their parents today versus what it was back in the days? Check this out. In 1970, it was only 31%. Today, it's over 52% of adults 18 to 29 living with their parents. Why do you think that is? Because it's expensive to go move on your own. Maybe we need to do something about that. But these builders, their incentive is only to build the big stuff.
Okay, yeah, we do need to do something about that. And that being said, I don't want to pretend that's the only factor. There's a lot of factors from 1970 to today. Number one, the needs of a lot of the population when it came to square footage, and maybe it wasn't even the needs. Let's just say this, the preferences from a lot of our buyers from then to now is absolutely about square footage, having more space, doing more things in the home. So I don't know if the square footage is completely about affordability. The other thing is, are kids staying at home longer because of affordability? I'm going to say that's one factor, but it's not the only factor. No doubt, as we look at the trends from the 70s until now, people are getting married later. People are staying in school longer. People are living at home. But part of this is absolutely a cultural shift. It's a slow down of getting to that family life, that having kids, all that stuff right away from today's society versus yesterday's society. I mean, if we were to go back into the 50s, a lot of 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds were getting married and starting to have babies right away. Clearly, that trend has moved as we started seeing more people having children later and later in life. So while affordability plays its role, I don't want to pretend it's the only factor in young people living at home longer. Also, as people have larger homes today, it's less of a press on the parents oftentimes for the young people to stay longer. So I definitely think there's more factors, but you're never going to get me arguing with the importance of affordability. The ability for people to be able to get out on their own, to me, is more important than the choice of whether they do or whether they don't.
They don't want to build this small stuff. Who wants to deal with this kind of stuff? Now, the challenge when you look at this isn't that simple. Labor shortage. 81% of construction firms reported difficulty finding skilled laborers.
We talked about this one in the past. I'm curious what he's going to say about this.
Part of this is zoning restrictions with NIMBYism. If you've never heard of NIMBYism, that is not in my backyard. Limits new construction. in high demand areas. Aside from that, you're looking at rising material costs. Lumber, raw materials have spiked, especially during the pandemic. And by the way, you're looking at all this stuff. Then you look at millennials, the biggest generation beating out boomers. They're anywhere between 28 to 43 years old. Guess what they want to do? They want to buy a house.
They do want to buy a house, and a lot of them, unfortunately, came of age to buy one during the initial housing crisis, where they couldn't get into a loan product, or there was so much going on that they struggled in order to get back in the market at that time. And of course, what did they see? A lot of them saw their friends and their parents lose a tremendous amount of value. So no doubt for the millennials, again, there were a lot of factors that pushed back their early home ownership, and a lot of them are absolutely starting to see value at this stage going forward as well.
They can't, because we're no longer building these small starter homes. We're concerned about building these big homes that are more profitable, not these guys, for these guys to get started. This is an issue. Another reason why this is taking place, because these BlackRock, State Street, Vanguards are getting into and they're starting to buy these properties. Like, listen, you're going to need to get a property. We'll overpay for it. What do you mean by that? Let me show you this chart. Here's a national number on investor market share. Look at this. Just 24 years ago, in 2000, only about 6% of properties being bought were bought by investors. You know what that number is today? That number is today at roughly 17%, 3x of 24 years ago, which means what? Typically, regular average family would go out there and buy a property. That's not the case today. Investors are sitting there and say, look, guys, you guys going to need it. You're going to have to rent it from me. There's nothing you can do about it. You need it anyways. You're not going to buy a property. Come to me. And guess what investors are saying? We'll even pay more. Even though we're buying it cash, we'll pay more what the average guy's going to need. 90 days of financing, we'll pay more. What do you mean you'll pay more? Here's the data for you. The typical home sold by an investor in June fetched 58% more than the purchase price, slightly down to 62.1% a year earlier, but still above pre-pandemic levels. So a seller, if you were selling, wouldn't you be like, look, whoever wants to pay me the most, you're not doing anything wrong. It's like, I'll sell it to the investor. I don't know if it's good for everybody, but I'll sell it because you're paying 58% more than the other guy. They're okay with that. So they're not buying it for 1 year. They're not buying it for 2 years. They're buying it for 40 years. They're going to have a little monopoly in that community, but you're going to have to go through them. Most people don't have a choice. Now, you may be asking, Pat, which one are these guys buying anyway?
All right, let me say this. I'd like to unpack that data. I'd love to know where the 58% number comes. I'm not seeing that here in my market, that outside investors. Now, obviously, West Michigan, we're a smaller market. If you're a larger market, Chicago, if you're talking about New York, East Coast, West Coast type of stuff, yeah, that might be the case. I'm certainly not seeing it here. If you're an investor today where rates are sitting at 7 3/4, and that's owner occupied, oftentimes rates are in the 8s and the 9s at that stage. I'm going to tell you, I think you're not going to be seeing the same returns you were in the prior 4 years. So that's one of those things. Obviously, I have a lot of thoughts about corporate investment and specifically foreign investment in our real estate market. I'll save that for another video. However, I'm going to tell you, in my marketplace, it's still a great place to invest. However, I'm not seeing people paying 58% above where owner occupants are in that situation. And quite honestly, while investors are absolutely a factor here in West Michigan, they're not the driving force of the market the same way owner occupants are here. So I would say nationwide, I'm not sure where that number's coming from, but I'm not seeing the same thing here in West Michigan, although still a great place to invest.
These BlackRocks, are they buying? They're probably buying the bigger, nicer stuff like $600,000-$700,000. There's no way they're going after the small, low price stuff, right? It's exactly what they're going after. Take a look at this. Same chart since 2024. Orange, low price. Green, mid price. Blue, high price. They're interested in the low price. It used to be only 10% 24 years ago. It is 24%. 1 out of every 4 out there, they're interested in the low price.
Why? Because those properties are going to cash flow better for them. And obviously appreciation means something to investors, but cash flow is absolutely what a lot of them are looking. In the higher end, much harder to cash flow. In the lower end, much easier to cash flow. So yeah, it's natural that a lot of these investors are seeking out those properties. Again though, if you're not a cash investor, the cost of financing today is absolutely putting a lot of investors either back or out of the game, as well as higher down payments, because a lot of banks believe investments carry more risk when appreciation is not screaming up at a 12% rate like it was in the past here in West Michigan.
the millennials, the next generation, are not going to be able to afford. They're going to rent through them. It's an easy annuity that they're investing into. So do we have a solution? Is this just going to be fear porn the entire time, or are we actually going to give you a solution? Here's a solution. Check this out. Do you know only out of U.S., this is the map, only 2% of U.S. land, 2% is urban land. However, in that 2%, 82% of U.S. lives in this 2%. 82 lives in 2%. What about the other 98%? The other 98% is just waiting for you to go build out. What's my point here? In 1990, we used to live in a city called Plano, Texas before I came to Florida. Plano, every weekend we used to go to a city called Frisco. I met the mayor at an Inc. conference that I was at in Arizona or Tennessee. I don't know where I was, guy named Mayor Masso. We go play poker. And then afterwards he says, I want you to come and look at my city, Frisco, see what we've done to this great city of Frisco. So I go to Frisco. He takes us, introduces Stolen Ryan, Don Nelson, all these guys, the old governor of Texas. What was his name? Governor Perry. We meet the governor. We're having all these conversations. And said, did you know Frisco in 1990 only had 6,000 people living here? And they start giving us a tour. Really? Where's it at now? Do you know where Frisco's at right now? Frisco went from 6,000 people in 1990, where the average home price you wanted to buy in Frisco was $58,000. Today's Frisco's population is 234,000, and the average home price in Frisco today is $700,000. What's the point? Guess what? Go build in a new area. Go to a new city. In California, guys couldn't afford to buy a house in LA. Guess what they did? They went to Northridge. Then you couldn't afford to buy a house in Northridge. They moved to Valencia, Canyon Country. Then you couldn't afford to buy a house in Canyon Country. You moved to Palmdale. You moved to Lancaster. There is plenty of areas to go move to and build. Somebody may say, but Patrick, that's ridiculous. Why can't we just make the houses cheaper in the area that we live? Because it's called capitalism. You don't control the market. If somebody wants to pay for it, what are you going to do about it? You can cry all you want. You can come in and put regulations saying, you can't let these prices be higher than $220,000. You don't dictate that.
Let me unpack a little bit of this for a moment. Yeah, well, yes, I agree with this basic concept. There's a little bit of a problem with this. First off, the other 98% is just not out waiting to be built. Let me tell you the reasons why. Because we still have to have access to things in order to build homes that people want and are willing to pay for. A couple of things that really are important before the other 98% is just waiting out there. Number one, we've got to have access to utilities, and the other 98% of the land doesn't have access to utilities, specifically water, sewage, electricity, natural gas, all these different infrastructures. The other thing that we have to look at too is the ability of that buyer to get to work to pay for the home. If you're driving here in West Michigan an hour and a half to work because the land was unwanted and cheap, yeah, let me tell you, it's going to add a lot more problems than it solves at that stage. So while I agree again with that concept, should we be opening up areas? Should we be developing areas? The answer is yes. And are we here? Yeah. Look at the building in Zeeland. Look at the building in Wayland. Look at the building in Dorr. All of these small town areas. Middleville, another one, that are absolutely exploding with homes starting to fill in and that whole entire thing. That being said, going further down or further away before we've actually filled up some of the areas that already have access to the infrastructure, as well as, of course, jobs, is not really a viable solution. So yeah, I mean, there's some truth to what he's saying in the concept, but is it just as easy as, hey, look at all this land, go build on it? No, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, especially the makeup of that land. And if you don't have sewage and you're looking at septic, the ability for it to drain is a huge piece so that you can create and put those systems on. Not everything perks. And so that's an important piece if we're building off the grid in and of itself. Obviously, the other part is the further we get off of the grid, the higher a lot of our costs become. Not just for the systems, but even to get the labor out there to build the product. So yeah, okay, I definitely agree with that concept. Should we expand? Is it as easy and as simple as he just made it? I'm going to tell you, I honestly don't think it is.
We can go to a new city, a new area, and say, guys, let's go build this area. You bring investors in, you start building the rest of the history. Let me give you some more testimonies outside of Frisco. You have Gilbert, Arizona, near Phoenix. It went from 109,000 people living there in 2000 to 250 today. Katy, Texas, went from 46,000 in 2000 to roughly 100,000 today. Johns Creek, Georgia, near Atlanta. It wasn't even a city in 2006. It became incorporated in 2006. You know how many people living there today? $80,000. I've been there many times. Aurora, Colorado, near Denver, used to be at $276, now $386. I can give you a ton of these stories. Henderson, Nevada, Fishers, Indiana, Maple Grove, Minnesota, Springfield, Tennessee, Cary, North Carolina. You're going to hear so many of these stories taking place. The market is wide open. But if somebody sits there and says, well, I'd like to live in this area, I'd like to live in that area, the market is wide open. However, if there's one thing I can say as a policy that the president could be able to do, and I'm sure they're thinking about this, you can come out with incentives to help these smaller builders that are focused on building houses under 1,400 square feet and say, here's the incentives. Go do XYZ. You know who else can do that? States can do that. Governors can do that. What if a governor of a different state came out and said, here's what we're doing? Guess what? Rather than being, you guys are charging too much for the house. People are paying for it. What are you going to do? You'd sell the house for $1 million if somebody wants to pay for it. Well, it wasn't worth $1 million 6 years ago. Who gives a shit? The market dictates the rate. But the governor could say, you know what we're going to do? All these areas that are not built, any builder that wants to come and build this area, we're going to give you incentives. Have you seen the video of what Dubai looked like 30, 40 years ago? And the sheikh, that he's walking around and saying, one day this place is going to be this. And what happened to Dubai today? Went from a desert to today, God knows how many businesses are based out of Dubai. Starts with a vision. Somebody can watch it saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go start this place, and it's going to become a town with only 5,000 people, and I'm going to bring some builders in this area, start selling it.
I'm going to have to say, if there's one point of this entire video that I would jump from the mountaintops to agree with, it's this one. Do we need to incentivize starter homes? We do, 100%, because the natural ecosystem of business is absolutely drawing builders to the highest profitability model. I get it, right? We all would work that way with efficiency in our businesses. It makes perfect sense. That being said, do we need to incentivize the starter homes, the lower end? I don't know if it should be based on square foot like he's suggesting, but it should absolutely be based on entry price. What is that starter home price in your area? That's where I do believe the government should be incentivizing these builders to put up that type of product. I agree wholeheartedly with this concept. And for those of you out there who are like, oh, that's not a free market, the government then is manipulating that market. Are we really pretending the interest rates aren't manipulated by banks and government entities and the whole entire process? I think, of course, we all know that they absolutely are. That's why everybody hangs on these Fed meetings. Oh, by the way, the Federal Reserve is not the government. It's the banks that bank for banks. So let's not say that the government's controlling the rate there, but they're certainly influencing. They're certainly appointing chairman of the Fed. They're certainly definitely having their policies, their wants and needs considered by the Fed chairman. A lot of factors, obviously, that go into that. So again, I do think if we're already manipulating the market like we clearly are and clearly did through COVID, then there is nothing wrong with incentivizing the product the market needs most to continue on with the system. And that 100% is starter homes. I do believe that young people need more access to affordable housing, sustainable housing, and still having it high quality housing, not just the old junked up things that need to be rehabbed. I'm talking about real housing people can move right into and be able to have a safe, productive existence in there. So yes, if we're going to talk about what can the government do, this is probably the one policy that can start to have an immediate effect and put the industry to work for itself to sustain itself.
The crisis is there. The ears you have. Millennials are listening. Fear sharpens listening. Present your opportunity, go to your governors, go to states that are open to this idea, and then do something about it. You could become a hero and solve a massive problem Americans are facing today.
Okay, I'm gonna have to tell you, the way he wrapped it up, I'm 100% on board. Patrick Bet David, definitely on point in a lot of facts there. Was there a little hyperbole? Was there a little exaggeration? Was he putting on a bit of a show for some of it? In my opinion, yeah. But the core of what he's saying here is 100% true. I definitely hope that the lawmakers, that the industry, that a lot of people really start to have that conversation, because a healthy housing industry leads to a better quality of life for the nation, for communities, for all of us as we go around. So if you appreciated, if you enjoyed this content, again, please help me out. Subscribe to the channel, give me that thumbs up, and if you are thinking about finding the right home for you and your family here in West Michigan, reach out to me. My contact information is in the description below. Thank you, and I can't wait to see you guys next time here on the channel.